actually lost my job last year, and kind of like the dream what Greta was saying, the Lord actually gave me a dream before I lost my job, and so it's all a part of His plan. I didn't really mean to write a book. It kind of just dropped on me, and so I just wrote down what I heard from the Lord. So my book is called Floodgates, Discovering the Treasure Within You, and I'm going to read chapter 3. It's called The Struggle. I remember tug-of-war as a kid, two teams pulling in opposite directions. The team that won based on several variables: the number of people on the team, the strength of each individual, and the strategies of the individuals. The tension between good and evil is a constant tugging motion. A choice always has to be made. The fruit reappears in our hand each time we are faced with a temptation. We have to choose every day, every minute, if we will give in and bite. It would appear that the enemy would have every advantage over us. He seems stronger, the number of temptations seem to outnumber our will, and the strategies he has developed after observing humanity since the fall of man is vindictive and calculating. It seems like we can't win, but it's all a matter of perspective. There is a strong, interdependent relationship between provision and worship. Out of the provision of God flows worship. When we truly worship God, He provides. It takes us back to the first storehouse, Eden, where every provision was met. God would take Adam for walks through the storehouse. Together they would look and marvel at all God had created. On these walks, God points out everything created, every provision made. See, I have given you dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth, every plant yielding seed that is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. Together they would admire everything God had done, everything God made, and agree that it was indeed very good. This is worship, a lifestyle of agreeing with God. The more you agree with Him, the more He reveals to you, and the more good you see. Once Adam ate the fruit from the tree of good and evil, his eyes were opened. Open to what? Well, if we go back to the walks God and Adam would take together, before the fall, when God's spirit and Adam's spirit were one, God would show Adam something, and Adam would see as God saw, from the Father's perspective. Then Adam would agree that it was good. But since Adam's eyes were opened, he could now see from a different perspective. His perspective was split, the perspective of good and the perspective of evil. Adam could now acknowledge something he didn't or couldn't acknowledge before. Acknowledge doesn't just mean to know something. It means to recognize it as a fact or truth, or to declare one's belief in. Adam's ability to recognize fact or truth had been compromised. As a perfect being, Adam only recognized God's word as a fact or truth. Now he had the capability not only to recognize the good God had provided, but he could also recognize the evil Satan presented. He traded the truth for a lie, good for evil, provision for poverty, intimacy for enmity, blessing for a curse, unity for discord. It was a bad deal. So now we're in the garden. Before the fall of man, provision was made and worship was easy. After the fall, provision is labor intensive and worship requires sacrifice. Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and you have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now it's a struggle, and the struggle is made apparent in the next generation. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil, In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also brought an offering, fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. The act of worship toward God is to recognize and give reverence for the provision he has given. Because sin fractured the fellowship of God and man, due to the impurities that lie in the heart, God must test the clarity of the heart. Because he is holy, it is against his nature, his very being, to be in the presence of anything tainted. Abel gave his very best to the Lord, while Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. Abel brought the firstborn of his flock. God was pleased with Abel's act of worship, but displeased with Cain's. Cain then kills his brother, and God says, "What have you done? Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you, and you will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain says, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence." Wait a minute. God didn't say anything about being hidden from his presence. God said, "You are under a curse." Cain understood that in being cut off from the land, he was cut off from provision. He also understood that not being in the presence of the Lord is the worst part of the curse. He cannot bear to be cut off from the presence of God. Worship is interrupted when giving does not flow freely from the heart. The good news is that if we pick God on our team and allow his strength to work in us, he alone is so much greater than anything or anyone on the opposing team. He makes a way to restore what was lost: our provision, our worship, our perspective. The book is $10. Thank you for listening.